Thank you. I'm not the biggest Cassandra expert out there. I used it in production at my last company, but didn't really get a really good handle on it. So I wanted to come out and do kind of a personal project, which has kind of morphed into something a little bigger. Narmal is another email app. And if you're wondering about the logo and the name, it's a narwalrus. No, those don't exist out in the wild. I wish. And Narmal is just like nar as in narwalrus and kind of like mail, email. Just a easy domain that was only $9.99. So that's the explanation there. If you read even like TechCrunch or Panda Daily or anything, you probably get at least like one article a week talking about how email's broken and some new app is going to come and fix it all and change everything and revolutionize the world. And that's me too, but I don't necessarily think that email's broken. I mean, it's kind of like an old 80s classic movie. It's probably about time for a reboot or an update, but it has a lot of good things about it too. So I'm not necessarily bashing on email all the time. But there are problems for sure. And if you guys can see this, this is actually my home screen, and I want to point out 3 things. First, that I have 16 Tinder notifications. I'm kind of a big deal. Not bragging or anything, but I'm bragging. Second, and less importantly, is that I have almost 14,000, to be exact, 13,717 unread emails. That's across a couple Gmail accounts and iCloud. And that's just unread. I probably have like 25,000 read ones. And I'm guessing that's not that uncommon. And the third thing, which is connected, is that if you look at my messages, I have 0 unread messages. And I do have a few friends, I promise. So it's not that I'm a total nerd. But I think the main thing is that why I have almost 14,000 unread emails and 0 unread text messages is in large part because messaging/chatting is just fun. It's a better interface. It's a little easier to work with, whereas email is you just get overwhelmed with it. You get swamped by it, and then every little thing just kind of builds on it, and then you don't want to even check it because once I got to, I think, like 1,000 emails, I was never going to go through all of them. It just wasn't going to happen. It was too much work already, and now times that by 13, it's never going to happen. But I started thinking, what if we could kind of combine the best features of texting along with emailing, because emailing does have a lot of good features, and we don't want to throw kind of, what's that saying, the baby out with the bathwater, if you're into that kind of thing. But little backup. So this is an email app that's bottom line going to make emailing more like texting. Initially for iOS, on the back end I'm using Scala, using Cassandra as the primary data store. Probably going to throw some other things in there too soon, but I'm really liking Cassandra so far, and doing it on AWS, which has a lot of advantages and fits pretty well with Cassandra, I think. So let me explain the overall concept a little more, and then we're going to get into this isn't in production yet, so I haven't been dealing with a lot of those issues. So I'm pretty much going to be talking about mostly my data model. And so if you know nothing about Cassandra, this may not make a lot of sense. If you know too much about Cassandra, then this may be boring. But you have to listen to me anyway, so let's do it. So the app's basically going to come down to 3 views, at least initially. And the first view is what I'm calling it the conversations view. Say I am emailing you. You and I are emailing back and forth. And say we're emailing several times over a few years. Basically, a conversation is just a group of people. That's all it is. And we can email back and forth, and we have different subjects. And all those subjects, all those emails are going to be underneath this one conversation, no matter how many times we email over a period of time. And it can work with you, me, you, all 4 of us as a conversation, or just one-on-one. And then kind of the next layer down is if the 4 of us are emailing, then we have different subject lines for different things, different subjects, different topics. I call this kind of the topic view. It's the same thing as a subject. But so each 3 of these things are different subjects. And so it kind of helps organize things by subject and just kind of makes it a little easier to understand. And then kind of the next logical flow is kind of a chat view. So actually once you click into that subject, then you go down and you can see all the emails that are a part of that subject. And so right now, I'm most familiar with Gmail, But I kind of feel like kind of what we have right now is more or less the second and third screen right now. So if you and I were emailing and we had about, say, we email all the time, we're really good friends, and we have like 1,000 different subjects, you would see all these 1,000 subjects in your list, in your main Gmail app once you log in. But kind of one of the advantages is now all those 1,000 are going to be underneath our conversation, so we can just go in and I'm not going to be kind of spammed with thousands of things. It's going to kind of consolidate email and make it look a little more reasonable to deal with without really making it that much different. And so kind of basically the bottom line is that I didn't put this in, but one user can have many conversations. A conversation can have multiple topics, and a topic can have multiple emails. And the thing that I really love about Cassandra is the data model. I think it's a ton of fun to use. I could be using it wrong, but so if I am, tell me, but it's been so much fun to play around with so far, so I don't feel too bad. But so this is actually pretty close to what I'm using. As far as a conversation, you have a user ID and you have a timestamp. So the partition key is user ID, the clustering key is the timestamp. So let's go ahead and insert a few things. First one, and all these are going to be the same users. And so really the main difference is they're all going into the same row, which means the same node, which makes queries pretty quickly because we're only going on one node, and they're all contiguous by timestamp. And so we have three things here, and basically so the recipient hash is kind of what I'm using to differentiate it. It's not actually in the primary key. So the problem is if I wanted to get just the last n most recent conversations, that I'm going to have two of the same conversations. I'm going to have the first one, the 14x and 147. That's kind of my abbreviation for timestamp. Didn't want to type out 10 or 11 digits for epoch time. And so we're going to have that come up as a double, or not a double, but come up twice. And I'm more or less fine with that right now because I can filter that out application side. I thought about using something like Redis sorted sets to kind of actually store them and then do a query to Redis to find out the exact like contiguous spaces I need to do, but this is way easier operationally. So that's kind of what I talked about. And we're assuming that Z is more recent than X, and in reality I have a cluster order by timestamp, so this is kind of reverse what it would be, but we can all get the point. And this is just where I'm going to plug Scala a little bit. This is confusing and it's not going to make sense because I didn't define the type class for you guys, but this is just my method where I group things by the recipient hash and then take the head of that list, so it comes into a map of lists, a map of string lists, and it takes for each recipient hash, which is the key. It's going to take the most recent recipient, or it's going to take the most recent conversation. So I'm not going to be showing to the user the actual kind of duplicate conversations. I'm only going to show the most recent conversation. And really the main reason I brought up Scala is because, in my opinion, it works really well with Cassandra, especially when you start, which I think you probably should be doing, is like using the asynchronous functionality of Cassandra, and that just makes it so easy. Scala and the futures and the actor model make it so easy to do non-blocking code. And this is kind of just showing off how nonsensical but badass functional programming can be. So now we talked about conversations, moving down to topics, which is just the same thing as a subject. And it's pretty similar, except now kind of the link to it is the link to the conversation is the recipient hash. So we have a compound primary key, compound or composite, I don't know the right term for that. And we still have a timestamp. Question?
Is the recipient hash a hash of all of the people in the conversation?
Yeah, exactly.
What's the timestamp?
Good. Timestamp is just the epoch timestamp.
Of the latest message, or?
Of the latest email. Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. And yeah, so the recipient hash, it's just a a tree set or sorted set, and then stringify it, and then MD5 hash it. So nothing too crazy there. But again, and so as you can probably see, timestamps the second one. And then now, instead of kind of taking the place of recipient hash, as far as the column value is thread ID. And I've only done this on Gmail, so I don't, maybe Yahoo and iCloud have different things, but the each email and each thread obviously has a thread ID. And so now we're gonna run into the same problem where if we do queries, we're gonna run into having the same thread ID, multiple you're gonna have basically the same topic, same thread ID, but just at different times, because you can email someone in the same topic, obviously same subject, but we only want to show each topic in this second screen or in this screen once. So in reality, and this is just kind of how that ends up looking, because now I have because they have different recipient hashes, they're different people. It's gonna be actually on 2 different Cassandra rows. So you can start getting the wide columns as opposed, or I guess we had wide columns before, but so a little different way to look at it. And we can do that same exact thing we did before with the Scala type class to filter out the duplicate. Instead of recipient hashes this time, I'm gonna filter out the duplicate thread IDs. So the user only sees one of each subject. And so now we get down to email, and emailing is, the email side of things is pretty straightforward. Just now we have user ID and we have a thread ID to kind of integrate back into the subject/topic. And this is going to be probably the widest part of the Cassandra row. And just kind of examples, what's going on. I don't care about sports ball at all, but I thought I'd troll you guys. So no worries. Go 49ers in the World Cup. So pretty straightforward. Now it's just the emails are going to be organized by the thread ID as opposed to topics organized by the recipient's hash. And so that's kind of interesting, I feel like, and some people may like that, other people may not. Other people may actually want to make emailing almost entirely like texting. And so what we can do there, which is really easy to do with Cassandra too, is just get rid of the entire, and I'm doing both of these, by the way, so whichever view you like, you'll be able to go to. Get rid of the topics entirely and have the emails correspond directly to the conversations. And that'll make that'll make it pretty much like texting, and do some UI improvements, but I think you guys can more or less get the idea. And we actually only need to make a really small change. So again, conversation now, skip topics, has many emails. And pretty much all we're gonna do is substitute the thread ID for the recipient's hash. And the recipient's hash is what corresponds to the conversation. So now we're gonna have much wider rows, but that's really not a big deal because we still have the timestamp. And as soon as we say we get the first 20 results, then I can just do a range slice query to get on the timestamp to get the next 20 results. So the wide rows part isn't a big deal, and entropy should still be okay. Another thing that I should probably, and just, this doesn't look too much different because they're not very wide rows, but, and so actually something I didn't, okay. So, and again, I'm using EC2, and one of the really cool things I found about EC2 is, brief story, I had about a year ago, I got $1,000 in Amazon credit, and it was, I looked on, totally forgot about it for like 11 months, then looked on and saw it, and that it was expiring, called them, they couldn't replace it or anything. So rather than just losing it, I spun up like a 12-node Cassandra cluster when I really only needed like, the replication factor of 3, still had a replication factor of 3, but just spun up 12 nodes, and it probably took about, doing it like the first time, not even practicing it before, it took about 10, 15 minutes. And then when I found out that, or when I knew that I needed to scale back down because I didn't want to be paying for 12 M3 large instances, just scaled back down first time, took maybe like 10, 15 minutes again. It's really easy. And I'm sure you can do, and so as far as like, another point, as far as like my data model goes, it's still relatively relational, and I think the range queries work well, but I mean, you could probably still implement, you could definitely still implement this in MySQL or Postgres or something, but either sharding it or maybe MySQL cluster would be easier, but as far as operationally, I think it's pretty hard to get how easy Cassandra is to just bring down and up nodes anytime traffic or whatever reasons, $1,000 in credit expiring. Some features that I haven't used, but which definitely are like a big poster child for Cassandra, are the multiple data centers. So when Red Dawn happens and the Russians and Nicaraguans invade and up to Colorado is occupied, your service is still going to be good because you have a data center in Virginia with EC2. And another thing I'm actually really excited about Cassandra with is Spark, first-class citizen there, and really excited about the streaming. Obviously, you can do like more MapReduce type stuff as well, but Cassandra's a first-class citizen there, and it seems like Spark's kind of taking over the world. But I think that's about all I have. So yeah, definitely not an expert in Cassandra, but it's been a lot of fun, and if you guys have any advice, love to hear it about things I screwed up on. Thank you.